In 1859, a respected London physician gave a woman a treatment that would shock you today. It wasn't a pill or a tonic. It was a medical procedure designed to cure hysteria. But here's the twist. The cure? Orgasms. And the doctors? They had no clue what they were really doing. Stay with me, because the story behind this bizarre medical practice is about to blow your mind. Make sure to subscribe to the channel and like the video. That really helps more hidden stories from around the world reach you. In 1859, a respectable woman in London, Mrs. Whitmore, walked into her doctor's office with a list of symptoms: anxiety, insomnia, irritability, and what she called nervous episodes. What happened next would blow modern medicine's mind. The physician diagnosed her with hysteria and prescribed a treatment so bizarre that it would have the medical community questioning everything: pelvic massage to induce an orgasm. This wasn't just a random quack on the streets. Mrs. Whitmore's physician was following widely accepted medical practices, and this treatment was used across Europe and America for decades. It was believed that a woman's emotional issues, from stress to fatigue, could be cured by inducing what was clinically called hysterical paroxysm, essentially an orgasm. Doctors believed that relieving this so-called medical crisis would reset a woman's health without ever understanding the true nature of what they were actually doing. But this wasn't the end of the story. The pressure of giving countless women these treatments led to a strange invention: the electric vibrator. What started as a way to ease the doctor's hands would turn into a revolution in medicine. But did they ever figure out what they were really doing? The answer will surprise you, and it's coming up next.
By the late 1800s, treating hysteria had become an industry. Physicians specialized in it, clinics were established, and women from all walks of life were flocking to doctors for this peculiar therapy. In fact, some women scheduled regular weekly or even bi-weekly appointments, sometimes for years, just to receive this treatment. It became so common that hysteria was considered one of the most widespread conditions affecting women. Doctors would perform these treatments for up to an hour at a time, sometimes using scented oils and a variety of techniques to induce orgasm. And yet, these doctors remained clueless about what was truly happening. They viewed the whole process purely as a medical procedure, believing they were curing something deep within the woman's body, never acknowledging the sexual nature of what they were doing. In their minds, they were just relieving symptoms, not giving women something they secretly longed for. But what if there was a way to make this treatment more efficient? That's when the vibrator entered the scene. It wasn't designed for pleasure. It was meant to make doctors' jobs easier. But this device would eventually change everything. Curious to know how it went from medical miracle to household sensation? Let's take a closer look at the vibrator's unexpected evolution.
The invention of the electric vibrator was a game changer. Dr. Joseph Mortimer Granville, frustrated by the strain of manually treating hysteria, created a motorized device that could deliver the same results in just minutes. What started as a solution to a doctor's aching hands quickly became the go-to treatment in clinics across the country. The vibrator was marketed as an essential medical tool, and it wasn't long before it found its way into American homes. At its peak, vibrators were advertised as effective, efficient, and a must-have for any modern medical practice. In fact, by 1900, they had become one of the most common electrical appliances in American households. They were featured in catalogs alongside other household essentials, like toasters and sewing machines. But here's the kicker. While these devices were marketed as medical innovations, nobody recognized their true nature. Vibrators were sold as nothing more than helpful tools for doctors and their patients, completely devoid of any connection to sexual pleasure. But just as the vibrator was gaining popularity, something unexpected happened. Society began to shift. As psychoanalysis took hold and Freud started to acknowledge female sexuality, the vibrator's reputation began to change. What was once a medical marvel became increasingly associated with sexual pleasure. And with that, the vibrator quietly vanished from doctors' offices. But how did this simple device go from curing hysteria to becoming taboo? Let's dive into how this strange transformation unfolded. By the 1920s, the vibrator's medical use was rapidly fading. It wasn't just the rise of psychoanalysis that changed its fate, but also the unexpected influence of early pornography. As adult films began to depict vibrators used for sexual pleasure, the device's medical reputation crumbled. Suddenly, what was once considered a groundbreaking tool in women's health became linked to something far more taboo. Doctors, once so proud of their medical innovation, now found themselves distancing from the very device they had promoted. The cultural shift was dramatic. By 1925, vibrators were disappearing from medical catalogs, and many doctors stopped using them altogether. The once common medical treatment of hysteria quietly faded away, replaced by a growing understanding of mental health and the psychological roots of many women's issues. What was once deemed an essential treatment was now seen as outdated, even dangerous. But what about the women who had depended on this therapy for so long? The legacy of hysteria treatment didn't disappear overnight. Even as medical practices evolved, many women continued to suffer from the dismissive attitudes of the time. But by the mid-20th century, figures like Masters and Johnson began to properly study female sexuality, uncovering what many women had already known, that the hysterical paroxysm was simply an orgasm. So what does this bizarre chapter of history tell us about the medical community's understanding of women's bodies? Let's wrap up with a final look at the long-lasting impact of this overlooked history.
As the medical community moved away from treating hysteria, the concept of female sexuality began to shift. The 1960s brought a much-needed focus on understanding women's sexual health, spearheaded by researchers like Masters and Johnson. They recognized what Victorian doctors had failed to see for over a century, that women, just like men, have sexual desires and needs that go beyond reproduction. This was the beginning of a new era in the understanding of women's bodies. However, the damage caused by decades of medical ignorance was not easily undone. The term hysteria had been used so frequently to dismiss women's legitimate health concerns that even when more accurate diagnoses were introduced, many women still struggled to be taken seriously. For years, women were treated as if their emotions and experiences were mere symptoms of an imaginary disease. The stigma remained embedded in both medical and societal attitudes. Looking back, it's almost surreal to think that the medical establishment not only failed to acknowledge female sexuality, but actually created an industry based on it without understanding what they were doing. The irony is staggering. Doctors were literally giving women orgasms thinking they were curing a non-existent disease. So next time you hear someone dismissing women's health concerns as hysteria, remember the strange and shocking history of how doctors treated female bodies without ever truly understanding them. This entire episode in medical history highlights how cultural blindness can shape practices for centuries. Doctors, some of the most respected professionals of their time, were completely unaware that their treatments were not just medical procedures. They were giving women the very thing they needed: sexual satisfaction. And yet, this was happening in a society that staunchly denied women any sexual desires or needs. The deeper irony lies in how these women, despite being treated as ill, often found comfort and relief from their treatments. The true impact of this history still echoes today. Despite the advancements in women's health, the legacy of hysteria remains, as many still struggle to be heard or believed when they express health concerns. The failure to understand female anatomy and sexuality in the past continues to influence how women's health is approached now. It serves as a stark reminder of how deeply ingrained societal views can influence the medical field, often at the expense of the people it's meant to serve. As we reflect on this strange chapter of history, we must ask, how much has really changed? Women's health was dismissed for centuries under the guise of medical care, and in some ways, that silence still persists. Understanding this dark history isn't just about the past. It's a crucial step toward ensuring that women's voices are heard and respected in the medical community today. The question remains, are we truly listening now?
Looking back at the history of hysteria treatment, it's clear that medical practices were shaped more by cultural norms than scientific understanding. Doctors, no matter how well trained, were blinded by the societal expectations of women's roles. As a result, millions of women received treatments that, in hindsight, seem both absurd and tragic. What's even more astonishing is how long this went on without any real challenge to the practice, despite its obvious flaws. Even though the medical community eventually abandoned the concept of hysteria, the stigma surrounding women's health persisted for years. It wasn't until the sexual revolution and the rise of feminist movements in the mid-20th century that women began to take control of their own sexual health narratives. The shift was long overdue, but it highlighted just how deeply embedded the misunderstanding of female bodies had been for so long. The invention of the vibrator was just one bizarre consequence of this ignorance. But its legacy didn't end with the fall of hysteria treatment. As we continue to learn about women's health, it's important to remember this chapter. The lessons from history aren't just about understanding the past. They're about ensuring that women's health is never dismissed or misunderstood again. Are we truly learning from this history, or are we still repeating the same mistakes? If you found this history as shocking as I did, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Your support helps uncover more untold stories that can change the way we see the world today. Let's keep the conversation going. Share your thoughts below and don't miss out on our next jaw-dropping revelation.